Welcome, friends, to ULTDC. We've published the program for January to March 2024, so look for that in your email. We appreciate all who contributed to this endeavor. And today we have a talk on regeneration, and then we continue our study of the ocean of theosophy. Usually we read or talk about briefly the declaration of the ULT, followed by the fundamental propositions of the philosophy of theosophy, and then we'll go into the talk. But first, we'll do a reading from The Voice of the Silence. Before thou settest thy foot upon the ladder's upper rung, the ladder of the mystic sounds, thou hast to hear the voice of thy inner God in 7 manners. The first is like the nightingale's sweet voice chanting a song of parting to its mate. The second comes as the sound of a silver cymbal of the Dhyanis, awakening the twinkling stars. The next is as the plaint melodious of the ocean sprite imprisoned in its shell, and this is followed by the chant of Vina. The fifth like sound of bamboo flute shrills in thine ear. It changes next into a trumpet blast. The last vibrates the dull rumbling of a thundercloud. The seventh swallows all the other sounds. They die and then are heard no more. When the sixth are slain and at the master's feet are laid, then is the pupil merged into the one, becomes that one, and lives therein. Before that path is entered, thou must destroy thy lunar body, cleanse thy mind body, and make clean thy heart. And now if we could hear the declaration of ULT.
Sure. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitutional, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves, by study and otherwise, to be the better able to help and teach others. The true theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all.
Next, we'll hear of the fundamental propositions of theosophy. If someone wants to volunteer for that, great. If not, I have it right here.
I can take that. So.
Okay.
Okay. The secret doctrine establishes 3 fundamental propositions. The first fundamental statement of the secret doctrine is a metaphysical one absolute, and it calls for an omnipresent, eternal, boundless principle in which all speculation is impossible because it transcends the power of human conception. It is beyond the range and reach of thought. and in words of Mundaka, it's also regarded as unthinkable and unspeakable. The second fundamental assertion of the secret doctrine is the absolute universality, the law of periodicity. It talks about a flux and reflux, ebb and flow, day and night, sleeping and waking, and a phenomenon that's so common, so universal, that it's easy to comprehend. The third fundamental proposition of secret doctrine describes the identity of all souls with the universal oversoul. So here it describes the obligatory pilgrimage of every soul through the cycle of incarnation in accordance with cyclic and karmic law. And it states that in order for every divine soul to acquire an independent or a conscious existence, it has to have passed through every elemental form of the phenomenal world of that Manvantara and acquired individuality or consciousness, first by natural impulse, and then by self-induced and self-devised efforts, checked by its own karma. And this helps it ascend through all degrees of intelligence, from the lowest to the highest manas, from mineral and plant up to the holiest archangel, the Dhyani Buddhas. The third fundamental proposition also asserts that esoteric philosophy admits no privileges or any special gifts in man, but those won solely by its own ego through personal effort and merit throughout a long series of reincarnations.
Thank you. So now we'll begin with a talk on regeneration. And just a moment while I get these slides. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Great. Okay. This talk is about regeneration. Regeneration is about being, becoming, and cycles. When one cycle ends, another begins. The new cycle is always based on the previous one, but it includes all that was learned or assimilated in that previous cycle. So it begins on a slightly higher level. And this can be symbolized by a spiral, where a ring is completed with each turn, but the next cycle also travels through new time and space and proceeds at a higher level. At this time of year, we are aware that our home, the Earth, is itself completing a cycle. It travels around the sun completely once a year. We count the beginning of the year as January 1st, but theosophically, we are told the new year actually begins on January 4th. But right now, as we approach the winter solstice, we're aware of a sunsetting of the current year and a twilight at the beginning of the coming new year. This time between the winter solstice and Easter has been considered a sacred time. Why? Because we are told the astral life of the earth is renewed, and the impressions and habits formed at this time will have added strength during the rest of the cycle. It's the time for planting seeds, both mental and psychical, so that a newer and better version will blossom in the coming weeks and months ahead. If this process can be begun during the darkest hours of the year, it can be accomplished in the full light in the months soon to come. Everything in the universe was framed according to the eternal proportions and combinations of numbers. HPB says in her article, "The Year is Dead, Long Live the Year." God or deity geometrizes, and numbers and numerals are the fundamental basis of all systems of mysticism, philosophy, and religion. The respective festivals of the year and their dates were all fixed according to the sun cycle. Since the process of regeneration is so intimately related to cycles, we can look at regeneration from the point of view of the smallest cycles up to the largest cycles, from an individual's moment to moment, day and night, or life and death, up to the very largest cycles such as Brahma's day and night and his life and death. But before elaborating on some of the regenerative aspects of those cycles, let's explore more of the symbolism of regeneration. In the Theosophical Glossary, Shiva is the third person of the Hindu Trinity. He is a god of the first order, and in his character of the destroyer is higher than Vishnu, the preserver. He destroys only to regenerate on a higher plane. He is born as Rudra, the Kumara, and is the patron of all yogis, being called Mahadeva, the great ascetic. Shiva is the destroyer and regenerator. His journey to the lower hemispheres appears to symbolize the evolutions of substances, which are born to die and be reborn. But esoterically, he is the god of reincarnation, a mystery having a direct reference to the reincarnating ego. As a regenerative force, Shiva is seen as a dark and evil force, the destroyer. But he is also seen as a yogi in his character of Rudra. His son by Parvati is Ganesha, the elephant-headed god of wisdom and the overcomer of obstacles. Other titles given to Shiva are Mahadeva, the great god, Mahakalpa, great time, Mahayogan, the great ascetic, and Ishwara Deva, or sovereign Deva, known in theosophical literature as Ishvara, the Lord or the personal god, the divine spirit in man, literally the sovereign, independent existence. There's a suggestive allegory about Shiva the Yogin, who reduces Kama, here symbolized as a creator, preeminently the divine desire of creating happiness and love, to ashes by the fire of his central or third eye. It is said that he reduced Kama to his primeval spiritual form. So this destructive power of Shiva is really destroying the dross in outer casing, revealing what can't be burnt away, what is pure and unadulterated, the spirit within. The Linga Purana is a scripture of the Shaivas, or worshippers of Shiva. Therein, Maheshwara, the great Lord, or Shiva, concealed in the Agni Linga, explains the ethics of life. And these are duty, virtue, self-sacrifice, and finally liberation by and through ascetic life at the end of Agni Kalpa, the seventh round. The fact is, all three persons of the Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, are simply the three qualificative gunas or attributes of the universe of differentiated spirit matter, self-formative, self-preserving, and self-destroying, for purposes of regeneration and perfectibility. This is the correct meaning, and it is shown in Brahma being made the personified embodiment of Rajaguna, the attribute or quality of activity, of desire for procreation, that desire owing to which the universe and everything in it is called into being. Vishnu is the embodied Sattva Guna, that property of preservation arising from quietude and restful enjoyment, which characterizes the intermediate period between the full growth and the beginning of decay. While Shiva, being embodied Tamaguna, which is the attribute of stagnancy and final decay, becomes, of course, the destroyer. But how can we relate this symbolism to ourselves? How can we regenerate ourselves on a higher plane? We can do this most easily if we take advantage of cycles. Regeneration through sleeping and waking. Every theosophist ought to become aware of the importance of the three states of consciousness: Jagrat, the waking state; Swapna, the sleeping state; and Sushupti, the dreamless sleep state. Jagrat is our waking state and is the one in which we must be regenerated, where we must come to a full consciousness of the self within. This is where we try to do our duty each day through self-induced and self-devised efforts, where we strive towards the light of the higher self. The next state of consciousness is the dreaming state, or svapna. Since our waking state informs our sleep, so Jagrat acts on the dreaming state by producing dreams and suggestions, and these can either disturb or aid the person. The third state common to all is sushupti, which has been translated dreamless sleep. And the translation is inadequate, for while it is dreamless, it's also a state in which we all commune through the higher nature with spiritual beings and enter into the spiritual plane. It is considered the great spiritual reservoir, by means of which the tremendous momentum toward evil living is held in check. And because it is involuntary, even criminals and evildoers enter this state each night. And sushupti is constantly beneficent and salutary in its effect on all. The instructions that come down from a higher state aid the person in the waking state through calmness and concentration. But these messages can get corrupted as the being passes from dreamless sushupti back through the dreaming state svapna to the waking state jagrat, especially if in the waking state the person does things which then disturbs the dream state. If an unholy state of a person's waking thoughts infects one's dreams, then in dream, unholy suggestions can infect his brain and unwittingly make the man open to evil influences. By natural action and reaction, one can poison both the waking and dreaming states. It is therefore our duty to purify and keep these two planes of consciousness clear. Now, the ordinary, non-concentrated man, by reason of the want of focus due to multitudinous and confused thought, has put his svapna field into confusion. And in passing through it, the useful and elevating experiences of sushupti become mixed up and distorted, not resulting in benefit to him as a waking person, which is his right as well as his duty to have. Here again is seen the lasting effect of the conduct and thoughts when awake. So it appears that what he should try to accomplish is such a clearing up and vivification of the swapna as shall result in removing the confusion and distortion existing there, in order that upon emerging into waking life, he may retain a wider and brighter memory of what occurred in the deep sleep state. This is done by an increase of concentration upon high thoughts, upon noble purposes, upon all that is best and most spiritual in him while he's awake. The best result cannot be accomplished in a week or a year, perhaps not in a life, but once begun, it will lead to the perfection of spiritual cultivation in some incarnation hereafter. By this course, a center of attraction is set up in the person while awake, and to that all his energies flow, so that may serve as a focus in the waking man, to carry him into the dream state with greater clearness. By reaction, this creates another focus in svapna, through which he can emerge into sushupti in a collected condition. Returning, he goes by means of these points through svapna, and there, the confusion being lessened, he enters into his usual waking state, the possessor, to some extent at least, of the benefits and knowledge of sushupti. The difference between the man who is not concentrated and the one who is consists in this, that the first passes from one state to the other, just as sand does through a sieve, while the concentrated man passes from one to the other similarly to water through a pipe, or the rays of the sun through a lens. In the first case, each stream of sand is a different experience, a different set of confused and irregular thoughts, whereas the collected man goes and returns the owner of regular and clear experience. Finding time during the day to concentrate or meditate, to create a focus based on universal themes of love, oneness, brotherhood, the one life, etc., aids in this natural process and accelerates his spiritual learning. It is best if the time of day one practices this is consistent, if possible, meaning not just every day, but at the same time of day. Making consistent points throughout the day to focus on the philosophy is helpful, because eventually one can carry an elevated state from point to point, creating an unbroken thread of consciousness throughout a day. Eventually, this can be done for increasingly longer periods of time, a week, a month, and more. Another way to aid this process is by keeping a devotional book near the bedside and reading it before going to sleep. Upon waking, one might find that one's very first thought is related to the ideas read in the devotional book right before sleeping and dreaming. This is one way to regenerate oneself using the daily cycle. Regeneration through reincarnation. William Q. Judge has written that when a man dies, he goes either to the supreme condition, from which no return against his will is possible, or to the other states, whether heaven, hell, Avicii, or Devakan, from which return to incarnation is inevitable. But he cannot go to the supreme state unless he has perfected and regenerated himself completely, unless the wonderful and shining heights on which the masters stand have been reached while in a body. This consummation cannot be secured unless at some period in his evolution, the being takes the steps that lead to this final attainment. These steps can and must be taken. In the very first is contained the possibility of the last, for causes once put in motion eternally produce their natural results. Similarly to the waking and sleeping cycle, there is the life and afterlife cycle. Our thoughts and actions together form the line of a life's meditation, and this could be summed up in a vibratory rate or a note. Where on the scale we will fall at the conclusion of our lives, perhaps we cannot as yet say, but we can make efforts to raise up our thoughts, express more compassion, act more universally, so that we raise ourselves up to a higher level. When given a choice, and these situations come up countless of times during our day, we can make an effort to improve our actions and manners even in small ways, to use a kinder tone, to be more thoughtful or gentle in dealing with ourselves and others. These small acts add up and gradually change the character and tenor of life. As one embraces positive changes, opportunities will open up that one never expected. The actions of a lifetime, therefore, bear upon the afterlife states, just as daily actions bear upon the sleep state. From the ocean of theosophy, Mr. Judge talks about the separation after death, wherein the better part of man is divided from his lower and brute elements. Struggling out of the body, the entire man goes into Kamaloka, where he loosens himself from the lower principles and skandhas. After this occurs, the higher principles, the Atma Buddhi Manas, ascends into Devakan, a Sanskrit word meaning literally the place of the gods, where the soul lives out an idealized version of the person's highest aspirations from the life just lived. As the self in Devakan is devoid of a mortal body, his concerns and thoughts are beyond those when in a body. In Devakan, the self assimilates all the highest thoughts and deeds from his former life. Only the highest thoughts and aspirations from the life just lived can become part of the immortal triad. So those are the basis for this heaven-like state of rest and bliss experienced in Devakan. The Devakanic state is a necessity for the soul, just as sleep is a necessity for the body. So by doing what was recommended to raise ourselves up on a daily basis, so these same ideas can be incorporated into the years of a lifetime. Setting aside time each year to consider the philosophy, higher ideals, one's relationship to them, and how to better apply them. And by connecting these points, improvements are made little by little, and eventually the whole person has been raised up by consistent effort and refinement. We are creating our futures by our actions today. So at this time of year, between the solstice and Easter, when the astral life of the earth is young and refreshed, this is a good time to reflect on the year past and to make resolutions for the next year. As we raise ourselves up, so we are raising the vibrations around us, affecting all the people, beings, and objects with which we come into contact. And where one acts in concert with others, so this effect is multiplied. While this is not easy, we are all checked by our karma. Slowly, we will loosen the knots we have woven in past lives. And a time will come when acting on a higher plane will come naturally. Just like it is natural for a baby to learn to crawl, and then pull up and learn to walk for a much longer period than he ever crawled. So it will be with those living a higher life. The Mahatmas were once people like us, struggling from life to life. But we will get there just like we learned to walk after crawling. At first, balancing on two legs is challenging, but it's the natural progression to walk. Though we used self-induced and self-devised efforts to pull ourselves up and learn to balance, so it will be with our further and future development. Another cycle we can consider is the very minute, is literally from moment to moment. Consider the Hindu terms Nitya Pralaya and Nitya Swarga. These mean ceaseless dissolution and ceaseless creation. This minute cycle is going on all the time. We are dying a little each moment and being born into the future a little each moment as well. Implicit in this is the idea that we can regenerate in any and every moment. We don't have to wait until we are about to go to sleep or until the end of the year. We can implement the highest we are able to in each and every moment. In other words, we are regenerating ourselves continuously. We can even see this going on in the body. Cells are dying each moment, and new ones are dividing each moment to create fresh material. It's not just one cell doing this, but literally countless cells are doing this every moment. The impression we give to the elemental beings in each thought we have, in lightning speed, can be raised up in an instant. We don't have to wait to regenerate our thoughts. We can send out a quiet but strong sense of love, goodwill, and oneness with others. We can reach out at any moment with gratitude to the Mahatmas for showing us the way forward, who are eagerly waiting for us to learn to walk on our spiritual legs. Also, there are very immense cycles we can consider, but these dwarf the mind when trying to understand them. A Manvantara, a year of Brahma, is a period of evolution composed of many rounds and races. And a Mahamanvantara, a whole age of Brahma, takes 15 figures to sum up. Then there are the pralayas, or periods of equal length of rest for Brahma to sleep, and after the life of Brahma. These are good to know about and to understand the fuller picture of the universe and our trajectory as we evolve, but are of little practical value in day-to-day life. We can see regeneration ties in with cycles, but it also takes desire and will to begin the process. So to conclude this discussion of regeneration, here are some quotes from Everyday Questions on Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms to shine some light on our next steps. In simple psychological terms, the only inhibition of the will is anxiety or fear. And man's fear is never fear of a thing, but simply doubt of his ability to meet the thing if it should confront him. Doubt of oneself and fear of oneself are the anxieties of ignorance. No man who faces and knows himself is afraid. Dissatisfied with the present state he may be, but in such a case, dissatisfaction is but a prelude to an invocation of will to correct matters. Death is feared when knowledge of the permanence of self is lacking or incomplete. Thus, fearlessness is the first quality assigned by Krishna as a requisite of successful discipleship. For only when a man realizes the inexhaustible power of soul can he fully release the will and attain concentration. Meditation represents the quality of steadiness in mental and moral states, which must be the accompaniment of a will grown strong. The common forms of will are not in action during meditation, but they are present in a very vital sense, since their combined potential energies are being reconstituted for newer and more meaningful expression. This is the action of the soul, the regeneration and reconstitution of the will. And lastly, the full power of soul resides in the bonds of spiritual interdependence, which reach out to and include all living things. All beings are sources of our individual strength, though they are such sources only because they are united in the divine unity, the one self, the universal will. Thus, attention engrossed in failures, doubts, and ignorances is but a hindrance. The will of the adept becomes fully active because there is no corner of the wide universe where he fears to enter. Will, as the force of spirit, moves in and from all beings in all states and conditions. So with that ends the presentation on regeneration, and we can open it up for discussion and comments and questions. Yes, Herb.
Yeah, I was just thinking when you went through this, I was also involved in a discussion on dreaming in the process that we go through at night. To me, to a great extent, it's the same thing, sped up. The regeneration part, you're talking, there's some parts that maybe don't relate applied directly, but it's the process we go through, and we just don't realize we're doing this when we're dreaming, because when we're in a deep dream state, the highest, we're communicating with the higher self, and we don't know of it when we wake up in the morning.
Yeah, the remembrance of that state doesn't come back to the waking state, but as we progress in meditation and clearing those channels, some remembrance will come through, and it might come through in the form of like instructions that can be interpreted to be from the higher self, or synonymous with the Mahatmas. I believe it's somewhere in, I'm trying to remember where in the theosophical literature, where it says often that instruction comes, the first instructions come through dreams. And it's because there's a clearing of those channels through steadiness, through calmness and contemplation in the waking state, such that it affects the dream state and makes it clearer, makes it more like a pipe instead of a sieve for those communications from the higher self to come through. So that's like a really good way to focus on, practical way to focus on regeneration.
Mm-hmm. There's a follow-up comment or question. I also we're also in a discussion about um, perfected beings and the snippets we are we may be feeling on the process. But the point I'm trying to make is some may have advanced to the point where they got a snippet of what of the truth, but they don't get the whole truth, and you have to work on that and you know until we get to that point.
Yeah, it stands to reason that we would get, little bits before we get the whole the whole thing. So we have to make use of the snippets we get, and the clearer we become, then eventually one gets to the point where the truth is communicated directly to the waking state. And it's said that the adepts don't dream. They don't need to dream because they're in touch with their higher self, the one self, at all times.
Yeah, Kathy, a wonderful talk, very inspirational. Question. So, does regeneration also mean, step towards spiritual birth? At some point, we go through multiple cycles of reincarnations on an upward spiral. We have to awaken ourselves, right? So, can we also take regeneration in a larger context as stepping towards our own spiritual birth?
Yes, for sure. That's the goal.
Yeah.
To be, regenerated on a higher plane. And even though we're doing that constantly, incrementally, at first by natural impulse, HPB told us that self-induced and self-devised efforts are required to continue the process at the human stage and to ascend to the next stage, which is what we would consider to be like the gods, to have a full knowledge of our spiritual nature and the oneness of all life at all times, unbroken. Really, regeneration cycles bears upon this idea of continuity of consciousness. And the adepts are, they can carry that thread of continuity from day to day. They don't need to dream. They can carry it through year to year. They can carry it through even some from life to life. They don't have no need to go into Kamaloka or Sushupti because they are constantly like in touch with that. They're regenerated essentially. So, but there is a birth into that. And that's symbolized by the initiation rituals in the mystery schools where, some esoteric secrets were imparted to the neophyte and literally was born sort of as a disciple and then taken to, there are a series of initiations. So at a much higher level, yeah, rebirth as, a god. That's the evolution we're working towards. And HPB points out in the Secret Doctrine and articles that the time is such that humans should be a little bit further along on this process, that we, due to the heavy karma of the Atlantean period and for other reasons, have become laggards, have been stuck in the, as slaves to the senses and not awakening the mind, as much as we could, because we don't use a huge portion of our brains. And if we did, we would, find that it has access points through meditation, contemplation to the higher mind. Yeah. Sure.
Let me turn it on, turn the mic on. Yeah, so I mean, I'm relating what you're saying to the higher as well as from the start. We are in kindergarten right now, most of us are. And we are, we're trying to meditate. We can't meditate for 5 minutes, most of us can't. But we have to keep trying. And it's the same thing with this knowledge that the adepts are in tune with. We're trying to get in tune with. We get little snippets along the way, and then in meditation, we as we get in tune with this with the meditation, and we get broader meditation, if you will, more minutes of more minutes of these moments of insight until we are fully insightful and all 24 hours a day. Is that kind of what the Theosophy is teaching here?
Yes, that is what it's teaching. But also acknowledging that the struggle is very real and it can take time to change habits. And so the idea of tying regeneration to cycles was that there are ways we can naturally accelerate this, sort of like speed boost points, where we get a little extra, boost from the cycle or the time at which the meditation is engaged in. And we can't all meditate right before we go to sleep because we might be like, tired from the day. But the idea is that if we make points within the cycle, then we can, try to connect them and make use of natural rhythms to help this process.
Absolutely. Talked about the 3 states: waking, dreaming, and sushupti, and then you work your way back the same route, right? As Mr. Judd said. So what we learned in sushupti gets distorted because we have to come back through a dream state, and really having meditative waking hours that really helps us to gradually clear that lens, so we can really recall what we experienced in sushupti. But Kathy, towards the end of your talk, you talked about us growing our own spiritual legs, and that's self-reliance, right? That's so critical that we have to remind ourselves that we have to look inward, to be self-reliant on our own inner self as we regenerate. So that's a really apt statement you made towards the end.
Yeah, we have to. No one can do it for us. The adepts can't do it for us. We have to grow our own strength through use. And the analogy of if you've ever seen a toddler, or a pre-toddler pulling themselves up at the edge of the table or a chair and making all this concentration to take a step or two, it's very difficult. It's very strenuous, but it is where our natural, who we naturally are, is we are fundamentally spiritual beings. So we have that on our side, so to speak. It is our true nature to be walking on spiritual legs, so to speak. So that should give us encouragement that it's not something impossible to attain. It's our future and our birthright. We still have to make the effort. It's not going to be easy, but it is something we are meant to do. And yeah, that was meant to be sort of encouraging. But yeah, clearing up our waking plane of consciousness is going to help in this life by bringing instructions back through the sleeping state, but is also going to help raise us up to, a better birth for our next life, where we have more opportunities to engage with the philosophy. We have more support from family or community or whatever it is that we need. Yeah, Herb?
Well, my mic is on. Okay. The voice says, look inward, thou art Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most of us don't believe that
Mm-hmm.
because it is so far away from our thinking process. So we have to clear away the cobwebs to get to that. So this is what I was thinking in the back of my head while you were making a lot of your comments, and it's it seems on the one hand that yeah, we should be more advanced and all that stuff, but most of us are not. We're all struggling, but that's what we learn. I think the opportunities are still before us, and we just have to keep after it. And you go to many of the, not to pick on any particular religion, they cast that as an outside situation. You know, you can't do that. You have to be, you know, you can't just be a Buddha. You know, there's only one Buddha, you know, but it's a, I'm trying to think about it as a wavelength which we are tapping into. And right now we're tapping into a little bit. And as we have reincarnations, and we get more attuned to that voice, then we find it. It might take many lifetimes. It probably will take many lifetimes to get to that point.
Yeah, and if we take the point of view of these larger cycles that have been going on, you know, one universe is based on the prior one. We don't know when it began, where it began, if it had a beginning, really, from our human conception. But we can make the analogy that if one or several have achieved Buddhahood, over these immense cycles, many countless have reached this stage, like too many to count, too many to even put in a number. So maybe, you know, they evolved onto other systems or other things, but just to hold the idea that there are countless Buddhas, you know, putting out beneficent ideation that we can tap into should also be encouraging, because it's on the side of evolution and, you know, an affirmation that we are one with them. So yeah, it should be encouraging to know that even if it takes many lifetimes, there's many countless who are aiding us in some way. That's why, you know, the quotes at the end really spoke to me. There wasn't enough time really to go into will, but, you know, will is going to be key. Desire and will, the desire to take this path and the will to start taking the steps and to not be afraid and to, you know, like it said, fear and anxiety inhibit the will. And if we had a full knowledge of ourself, we would have no anxiety or fear. So it's sort of like that catch-22. You need experience to get a job, but you have to have had a job to have experience. But still, you know, to bolster ourselves with, there's nothing to be afraid of, and to use our will to, you know, enact some of these things that, like meditation, and to be bold and not scared of our karma or death.
Seems like we have to unlearn a lot that we already have come with, because we don't all these ideas are very foreign to
Hmm.
most of us, I believe. And that's why we're in theosophy. We say, wow, this is a interesting idea that my neighbors don't know about, and yet deep down inside, it seems true. So
We all have to test and check and verify
that's
every
right.
step of the way.
Yeah.
Like verify, test meditation, and all the ideas that we hold. And to see where we're acting, like what are we serving through our actions, the senses or the mind? It can be start off that simply.
Mhm.
I like the last quote because it just to reiterate a part of it, the full power of the soul resides in the bonds of spiritual interdependence, which reach out and include all living beings. It's okay to rely on each other, and like you said, your neighbor may not be aware of some of these ideas. Their karma didn't place them in a life where they may have come to this knowledge naturally, but as you said, when you speak about something or you reach out to someone, there's a sense of interdependence and unity that's just sort of natural. It's just like a natural response. And I think if just understanding that our connection to other beings also can be a source of strength, that as we strengthen ourselves, we're strengthening others. As others strengthen themselves, they're strengthening us. It's a unity and universal will
Mhm.
underlying the individual.
I talk about fearlessness. The more we rely on our inner self, the more fearless, because people who depend on externalities are very fearful because, that's unknown, it doesn't exist. But, as we, meditate and concentrate on our inner self, that itself should gradually lead us to being more fearless, more equal-minded, right? And that's how you face the karma, without likes or dislikes. So,
Right. Like in the Gita, I think Krishna says, if there isn't, thought, then you can't have this chain of things, and a loss of discrimination, and a loss of discrimination, a loss of calmness, and without calmness, the loss of all. So the first step is to be calm and collected if possible. And like you said, the more we rely on our inner nature, the more use it gets, the more it'll grow stronger. Yeah.
Speaking about inner nature, it seems like that's the last place we kind of look for too, because we always looking outside there. What does somebody think about this, or whatever the case may be? But it says look under thou Buddha. Now, how do we go about doing that? Meditation was mentioned, I guess. Is key to doing that. I don't know. It seems like we have to me, it's a very simple process, but it's very complex. We made it complex for ourselves because of all these barriers we put up that we have to take down before we can get there.
Like you said, unlearn some of the habits we've engendered, and to see ourselves as Buddha is a deep inward look. We might not be able to see in that far immediately. We can we can know it's true based on analogy and hold it to be true while we test and check it, eventually to know it intimately. And even if a student can't start with meditation, they can start with contemplation. Mr. Judge talks about that in an article, contemplation, meditation, contemplation, something like that. But it's, you know, taking an idea and thinking about it, holding it like that all life is one, or some universal theme. So we can start in small ways, and as it was said, causes put in motion eternally produce their natural result. So a desire to know oneself and understand oneself as the one self of all, as a Buddha, as the Buddha, then that desire will have its effects, leading to opportunities to exercise and to come to know that. So we can also use desire, those principles, those lower principles, we can use them in the direction we want to go.
Absolutely. I think, for example, we talk about the three qualities, right? Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Rajasic tendencies where people are very desirous, and you can use that property to attain the sattvic state. So absolutely.
Yeah, just break it down into steps,
Mm-hmm.
I guess,
Yeah.
or smaller bits or
Mm-hmm.
little things, because, you know, our karma checks us and gives us difficulties that, you know, make it difficult to bear sometimes from day to day. So even if we can only do a little today, that karma will clear and we'll be able to do more another day. So we shouldn't feel bad if we can't get there all at once. We don't have to give up everything in the pursuit, but just to take step by step and to continue looking towards the light.
It struck me that you really are not giving up anything. We think we're giving up something, but we're really gaining.
Yeah.
And to just but it's almost impossible. Well, that's I think what our problem is, that most of us are in a position where we cannot accept that we are perfectible. And that's one of the steps that we have to learn that we are, and then we continue down that path to becoming more universal rather than selfish, you know, and so forth.
Yeah, a judge says to hold the ideal, to continually hold the ideal,
Mm-hmm.
the goal in front.
Mm-hmm. So there's so few of us, and, you know, you say, well, why? There's so few of you. Well, you know, it takes you one step at a time, and sometimes we go in cycles too, because sometimes there's a few of us, and so when HPB was here, we had fairly large number of people that were attracted to this. So, and now we're down at a low end. That's sort of a cycle too.
Yeah, that's true.
The regeneration process.
Yeah, the last 25 years of every century, there's an interest in occult and esoteric ideas, and that's another like cycle for regenerating, you know, population, a group, a larger group, but also an individual. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. So I guess with that we can end, and we're coming back in a few minutes to do the ocean or the Gita. The ocean.
Yeah, it's the Gita.
Gita, yeah.
Oh, okay.
This student was not being cross.
I thought it was the Gita. I said the ocean. I was looking at your paper, but that's fine. Okay, great.
Thank you, Kathy. Wonderful talk.
Sure,
Very
thank you.
grateful. See you soon.
So see you in a few minutes.
Okay.
Yes.